Majority is likely the most common day-to-day method for making decisions. It requires for a single voted upon option to have at least one more than half the total votes. It is possible to get no winning answer. In this example here, when we combine two rows that have option C as their first choice, they collectively reach 117 votes, which is 10 more than what is required as a minimum to win this vote with majority. Majority with elimination follows the same initial concept as regular majority, except it is specifically used when there are multiple options in what you vote for in second, third place, and so on, and require a majority winner. It is done by removing the least voted on options entirely and pushing up the next voted options in the lists until reaching either a winner or an impasse where the final numbers are the same, which would be inconclusive. We have already used this example to find majority, but to show how majority with elimination is done, let us say the row with 81 votes said 31, meaning C now has only 66 collective votes, which is below the 107 minimum votes we need to have a winner. Keeping track, we see that B has the lowest number of votes. Now, we would remove B from the list, which brings up any option below it as well. In one row, A was second to B in order of preference. With B gone, A has become the first choice in that row, so it has brought A's total number of votes up to 95. Still not having reached an answer with the majority, we remove C as an option, only leaving A. In this situation, we had to eliminate all but one option, but it is not always required to do so. Sometimes it is possible to reach an answer that has the majority before eliminating all other options. Plurality is used to determine who wins based off which option had the greatest number of votes, regardless of if it reaches majority. If there is a winner in majority, you will get the exact same winner using plurality. Besides the chance of there being two or more answers with the same number of votes, which would be inconclusive and therefore a loss, it is not possible to have no winner if all the options have different amounts of votes. This is also one of the main electoral systems for places like Canada, New Zealand, the United States, the United Kingdom, and other countries. Going back to the original numbers, we see that C wins, just like when doing majority to find an answer. Borda count, often shortened to just Borda, is a system which is based on the usage of points in a vote where there is at least one other position of preference available, like first, second, third, etc. It is named after a French mathematician and engineer who created the system officially in 1770, named Charles de Borda. How it works specifically is each tier is given a certain number of points in descending order from the top, which has the most points value. To figure out if a choice won, you find what position it is in voted favoritism, and multiply the value of that tier's points with the number of actual votes in that row. The option with the most points wins. It is not possible to have no winner outside of inconclusive multiple options with the same number of points. This voting method is used more in places in the Pacific, like Nauru and Kiribati, for example. First, we assign points to the tiers, then we write out what each option got by multiplying the number of votes with the number of points. If you make the lowest point value 0, you do not technically have to write it out, but it is good to do to make sure you are following the steps and writing everything out. Add the numbers per option. C wins again with the most points. For Condorcet, options are compared against each other based off where they stand in the listing of preferences against each other. If one option is being compared to another, you would take the amount of votes the row it is in has based off of which one is higher in that row's list of preferences. The option with the highest number of votes of the two wins. This method very often has no winners, because for there to be a winner, an option must not lose once against another in comparing numbers. It is also, of course, possible to have no conclusion due to two or more numbers being the same. This method was invented in 1785 by Marquis de Condorcet, also known as Nicolas de Condorcet, who was known for many things, like his views on equal rights for everyone. First, we write out all the possibilities for comparison. For A versus B, we completely ignore C, and pay attention to where A and B are positioned relative to each other. The higher up, the better. Continuing to ignore any options outside of the two we are comparing, we write out the rest of the comparisons like we did with A versus B. Add up the scores, and the biggest numbers win. Finally, we remove any scores that come from an option that lost against another. B lost against C, so it is removed. C did not lose against A or B once, so C is the final winner. Proportional representation is a system used to determine how many seats groups will have in a room politically. It involves percentages and outside information on how many seats there will be in total. Assuming there are 500 seats available, using the same example as before, we would find the percentage of each option within the total number of votes. Then we would multiply the decimal versions of that with the number of seats. Before we round, we add up the number of seats, not counting the decimal places, to see how far from the total it is. This time it was only 2 off, so we rounded up the numbers with the highest decimal points. But sometimes we do not follow the rules of rounding entirely. It is whichever is closest to a whole number rounds up. Should rounding up need to be done, but the decimal does not have to be above 5. The first place to publicly adopt this method was Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1873. Argentina still uses it in its closed list version, along with many other countries like Bolivia, Spain, Uruguay, and more. Approval involves keeping track of how many times an option was voted on in terms of willingness and not preference. In this new example, A was voted for 8 times. Regardless of if it is first or third place in votes, it still counts. Then, we count the rest the same way, and whichever has the highest number wins. Clearly, it is possible for numbers to tie, but besides that, there will always be a winner. This method is typically used for elections that can have more than one response on the vote.